The 1960s were a wild time for car enthusiasts. It was a decade defined by rock and roll, rebellion, and of course the birth of the muscle car. If you were lucky enough to cruise the streets in one of these beasts, you know that the roar of a V8 engine was the soundtrack of freedom. So buckle up as we take a ride through the 8 fastest muscle cars of the 60s. Each one of these beauties packed enough power to leave you glued to your seat, heart pounding and eyes wide open with excitement. So let's go. Number 8, the 1969 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. Let's kick things off with a car that could practically make the pavement shake, the 1969 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. This car was all about serious aggression and raw power. Its 302 cubic inch V8 engine roared with 290 horsepower and 290 pound-feet of torque. That's the kind of grunt that lets you know this car wasn't playing around. With a 0 to 60 mile per hour time of just 5.3 seconds, the Camaro Z28 isn't the fastest on our list, but it sure was one of the most iconic. The top speed of 135 miles per hour was nothing to scoff at either. This car was designed to compete, and boy, did it deliver. Whether you were burning rubber at the drag strip or just turning heads on Main Street, the Camaro Z28 had your back. But if you thought the Camaro was a powerhouse, just wait until you hear about the Plymouth Satellite 426 Hemi. Number 7, the 1966 Plymouth Satellite 426 Hemi. The 1966 Plymouth Satellite was a muscle car with a secret. On the outside, it looked like your typical family sedan, but under the hood, it was packing one of the most aggressive powertrains of the era, a 426 cubic inch V8 Hemi engine to be exact. This car could launch from 0 to 60 in a blistering 5.3 seconds, just like the Camaro, but this car had an ace up its sleeve. A whopping 425 horsepower and 489 pound-feet of torque. That's enough muscle to scare the living daylights out of anyone who dared underestimate it. The Plymouth Satellite wasn't just fast, it was terrifyingly fast, especially for the poor souls who thought they were just getting a ride to the grocery store. But if you think this car was sneaky, the next one is loud and proud. Number 6, the 1964 Porsche 904. Now I know what you're thinking, a Porsche in a muscle car list? But hear me out. The 1964 Porsche 904 was every bit a muscle car as its American counterparts, even if it was a bit of an oddball. This car was light, loud, and very fast. It could go from 0 to 60 in just 5.3 seconds, which was impressive considering its relatively small 2.0-liter 4-cylinder engine. The Porsche 904 was all about balance, with a curb weight of just 1,411 pounds and a top speed of 163 miles an hour. It wasn't just about brute force, but rather finesse. Still, when you floored the gas pedal, this car roared like a lion. But enough about the Germans. Let's get back to good old American muscle with the 1965 Mustang GT 289. Number 5, the 1965 Ford Mustang GT 289. The 1965 Ford Mustang GT 289 wasn't just a car, it was a cultural icon. This was the car that kicked off the whole pony car craze and became the dream ride for millions of Americans. With a 289 cubic inch V8 engine under the hood, this Mustang was as fast as it was stylish. It could sprint from 0 to 60 in just 5.2 seconds with 225 horsepower and 305 pound-feet of torque. The top speed? A respectable 128 miles per hour. The Mustang GT 289 wasn't the fastest car on the block, but it had something that many of the others didn't, an unmistakable presence. When you rolled up in a Mustang, people noticed. But if you thought the Mustang was cool, the next car is pure mechanical muscle. Number 4. The 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner 426 Hemi. If the Mustang was the nimble athlete, the 1969 Plymouth Roadrunner 426 Hemi was the heavyweight champion. This car was big, bold, and built to dominate. With its 426 cubic inch V8 Hemi engine, it could launch from 0 to 60 in just 5.1 seconds. And let's not forget about the 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. This car wasn't just fast, it was an absolute beast. The Roadrunner also became a legend on the NASCAR circuit, proving that it was more than just a pretty face. But don't get too comfortable, because the next car on our list is a Le Mans legend. Number 3. The 1967 Ford GT40 Mark III. The 1967 Ford GT40 Mark III wasn't just a muscle car, it was a statement. This was the car that took on Ferrari and won, dominating the 24 hours of Le Mans and cementing its place in automotive history. Under the hood, the GT40 packed a 289 cubic inch V8 engine with 306 horsepower and 329 pound-feet of torque. It could go from 0 to 60 in just 5.1 seconds and at a top speed of 160 miles per hour. But what really made this car special was its pedigree. Developed by Carroll Shelby and driven by legends like Ken Miles, the GT40 was more than just a car. It was a legend. But if you think the GT40 was fast, wait till you hear about the next car on our list. Number 2. The 1968 Dodge Charger 426 Hemi. When you think of American muscle cars, the 1968 Dodge Charger 426 Hemi is probably one of the first that comes to mind. This car was the embodiment of pure Dodge power with a 426 cubic inch V8 engine that cranked out 425 horsepower and 490 pound-feet of torque. The Charger could rocket from 0 to 60 in just 4.8 seconds and at a top speed of 160 miles per hour. It wasn't just fast though. This car was iconic. Whether you remember it from movies, TV shows, or just seeing one on the street, the Dodge Charger left an impression. It was the kind of car that made you want to break the speed limit just because you could. There is no doubt that the Charger was impressive, but so is the final car on our list. Number 1. The 1967 Chevrolet Corvette 427. Last, but certainly not least, we have the 1967 Chevrolet Corvette 427. This car wasn't just fast, it was blistering fast. With a 427 cubic inch V8 engine under the hood, this Corvette could go from 0 to 60 in just 4.7 seconds. It had 435 horsepower and 460 pound-feet of torque, making it one of the most powerful cars of the decade. The Corvette 427 wasn't just about speed though, it was also about style. This car had the looks to match its performance, as it was made with a design that still turns heads today. Whether you were cruising down the highway or tearing up the track, the Corvette 427 was the car that made you feel like a king. So there you have it, the 8 fastest muscle cars of the 60s that burned rubber, left tire marks on the asphalt, and etched their names into the annals of automotive history. But hey, narrowing it down to just 8 wasn't easy. The 60s were jam-packed with incredible machines, each gunning for the title of the fastest, most powerful muscle car around. And let's be honest, this list could easily have been twice as long and still wouldn't have done justice to all the amazing rides from that era. For example, how could we not give a nod to the 1969 Dodge Super Bee? This car was the automotive equivalent of a sledgehammer, as it was heavy, brutal, and packed with a monstrous 426 Hemi engine that made other cars tremble. Or how about the 1966 Oldsmobile 442? With its 400 cubic inch V8 engine and sharp handling, it was the underdog that always punched above its weight. Then there's the 1967 Mercury Cougar GTE. It may not have been as famous as the Mustang, but with its 427 cubic inch V8 engine, this cat had claws. And let's not forget the 1964 Chevrolet Impala SS409, a car so cool that it even had its own song. She's real fine, my 409. This beast could hit 0 to 60 in just over 6 seconds, which back in the day was fast enough to make your head spin. But even with all these honorable mentions, the muscle cars we highlighted are the ones that truly defined the decade. They weren't just fast, they were icons. They inspired generations of car lovers and cemented the muscle car's place in American culture. Each one brought something unique to the table. Whether it was the pure aggression of the Camaro Z28, the sleek engineering of the Ford GT40, or the sheer power of the Dodge Charger 426 Hemi. So while we could talk all day about the other incredible cars that graced the roads in the 60s, it's these 8 that left the biggest skid marks on our hearts. And if you're itching for more, there's a whole world of classic muscle out there just waiting for you to discover. Until then, keep your engines revving and your foot on the gas, because the legacy of the 60s muscle car is far from over.